Now, the coolest thing about looking at these traits and the ideas I want to transfer for you today is these minor differences in traits make a significant difference in outcomes. On average, when we look at some of the factor analysis of the HIP scores, the toy score, which is their desire to possess their reward object, the noise scores, their desire to be able to find their reward object by its odor alone, and their environmental scores, we see an average of only about 8 percentage point differences, but those 8 percentage point of differences yields double the amount of successful puppies. We go from 25% to 50% from 8 small percentage points. But those things have to be measured, and they have to be measured consistently. We have to make sure we're not buying into some of the emotionality. The other tester and myself that test all the puppies, we have all the puppies tattooed because I don't want to know their name. I don't want to know who their puppy rearer is. I don't want to know who their mom and dad is. I want to get out there. I want to test them by the same standard we've tested all the other dogs. But by applying those harsh standards and making sure we're looking for some real scores, we can look at that stuff and see that it does make a difference. Not a big difference when you're measuring it, but boy, it's a big difference in the difference of the outcome of the dogs. All right, let's pray for video to work. This is some of the early stimulation stuff we do with puppies. We talk about the importance of early petting. The only thing we've added into that is we actually have gloves on the person petting the young puppy, and the gloves have been sitting in explosives odor to hopefully work on some of the olfactory receptors of the dogs. Additionally, we take the puppies out with mom and let them watch mom run around and chase a reward object. We did try this with the puppies loose. It got real ugly as mom ran over top of their heads. So we've decided instead to try it behind a pen. We just recently did the Wiesel litter. They do not have the same tracking mechanisms that we see in these Labradors at all, in any significant proportions. Here with puppies, one of the things we want to take advantage of is play. Play is a huge thing. Another one of the neurobiological chemicals that we're concerned with is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. It's most present in young animals. It's most present in animals that have a lot of playful behavior. So we put puppies in an environment where they can actually look for their reward objects and self-pay them the rewards. These are just little boxes that will rock. They can smell the toy. They can rock the arm. Start off with an entire litter in there. Once the entire litter's in there, one of them figures it out, and before long, the rest of them follow suit. So we've started in a process of having young dogs do this. We do not spend time training this. I don't have staff members going in and showing the dogs how to do this process. We leave them to their own devices. That's the way play works. Play is non-sequential. Play is out of all kinds of different orders. We just turn them loose, let them play, and basically all the staff does is realize how many toys they hid and then try to count how many toys were out by the time they went back within a specified period of time. It's worked extremely well. We've seen this increase sniffing behavior, which is a main behavioral component in the adult dogs that we wanted to see increased, and this with some other exercises has helped. This is now a smaller group of puppies at an older age. We've taken them and put them in the same environment, and now watch the puppies as they go directly to the reward areas and immediately start trying to pay themselves a reward. Ironically, this doesn't transfer to the adult dogs. It only seems to work on the young dogs. The adult dogs don't seem to want to play with these things near to the same level as the puppies do. So again, I'm believing it has a lot to do with the young and playful behavior that we're looking for, taking advantage of it. In addition to having them exposed to explosives odor when they're young puppies over a week of age, we'll now take a wall, hide a bunch of towels in it that have been in explosives odor, and have the puppies go in and play tug-of-war. Again, one puppy always figures it out quickly, and the other puppies quickly follow suit. Now when we go to a little bit older puppies, immediately you see the first puppy, he goes, he finds it, shows great independent possession. The other puppy is obviously distracted, doesn't know what to do, sniffing the drain, kind of wandering around, trying to figure out why he isn't getting any attention. But the greatest thing is these are dogs and they're highly social, so before long the puppy that's not playing tries to figure out why the other dog is so entertained, and then we get them both working together. And now I have that dog helping the other one develop the physical possession as well as in association with the explosives odor. This kind of stuff is just ideal, and again, not training, not people going in there showing dogs how to do this. It's leaving them to their own devices and their own natural play behavior to let it occur. Additionally, we try to have the dogs not only learn to play with their reward objects, but also environmental development. I don't have a fixed playground. I'll never buy one. We buy bunches of toys. Toys R Us loves to see it when I'm coming in their store. And we try to set it up so it's different every single time. We've even found it's important if we have a play yard that's full of toys that they're exposed to play yards that have no toys. I've actually seen puppies cry if they've only had a busy environment and you take it all away, they don't know what to do with themselves. But again, without having to spend time and training and all that effort, these puppies are making their ways up and around and over open graded footing, wobbly surfaces, slippery surfaces, and by the time they leave my program, they're ready to move on into bigger and better things. Basically, the rearing mechanisms we have kennel-raised dogs, and we have had success. It is not my preferred method. It happens on occasion that we have to do that. We have dogs raised within a prison. Travis County State Jail currently raises about 4 puppies at a time for us, and we're getting ready to expand that to about 20 dogs at a time. We also have our volunteers who are absolutely the backbone of the success of our program. These people take the dogs home, do great environmental work with the dogs, and it's just amazing that they can give up hundreds and hundreds of hours of their time in order to support something like this. We continue to look for new rearing schemes, weekend releases. Can we do just daytime stuff where we can have people meet us in parks and try to figure out, what we can get away with as a minimum while we continue to look for more and more volunteers. Some great outlines on making a breeding program and making sure it works for you. This is from Rolf Balhars. He's a quantitative geneticist from the University of Melbourne in Australia. And this was printed in a book, and it just holds so true. I mean, the first thing he says is you have to understand the background aims of the breeding program. Obviously, the aims of a guide dog school and the aims of a detector dog school are going to be different things. The next thing you have to do is want to be able to change some of those phenotypic traits. What are the values of those traits? How do you weight those traits? Interesting papers out there are circulating with looking at the inverse relationship in biosensor between good hips and behavior. The better they worked, the worse their hips were. The better their hips were, the worse they worked. We have to be careful and make sure we're giving those correct values. How to measure those traits. When we first got our measurement system from the Australians, it had a 5-point scale. Everybody started putting 0.5s in it, made it a 9-point scale. So then the quantitative geneticists came over and said, why are you giving 9-point scale when I told you to do a 5-point scale? And, well, everybody else did it. And again, that's that human factor where you go in there and you go, well, that dog was a 3 and this dog's a 4, but this dog was really in between those two dogs. You got to make some tougher decisions and make sure you hold to that measurement trait system. You have to determine the heritability and heterosis. Is it going to become a gene that shows more and more frequently? I can't tell you how many times I've had people say, I want you to use my dog, he's a great dog. He retrieves all day long. And then I'll just do a couple of tests and find the dog really isn't showing the traits that I would want to breed for. He is a good, playful dog. He will retrieve all day long in the backyard in the heat of the day. But there's other things we have to make sure we're making the genetic success versus just that phenotypical behavior we're seeing, which may not have any genotypical basis. You do have to choose a breeding strategy. That's never easy. Closed population, open population, semi-open population. How many dogs you want to produce. If you want to make genetic change, sure, breed 300 dogs a year, but then you have to have 300 kennels, and that makes everybody upset when you start trying to make enough staffing to take care of that. But your strategy has to be something you're going to stick with. You need to synthesize that strategy in order to meet all your goals because there's practical considerations like cost, staffing. You have to maintain your facility. You have to let your staff go home at night. I wish I didn't have to, but they make me. And then at the end of that, you have to check that entire plan for feasibility. I can't tell you how many breeding programs I've seen come and go because they started with a great plan and then wandered on their way. And in the end result, they really didn't prove what they set out to do. You have to be mentored. You have to be overseen. I'm getting ready to go through 5 years of research with the University of Texas Animal Personality Institute, looking at all the biometrics, the psychological metrics. And then I have a quantitative geneticist coming on board. I think we sign her up next week to be able to look at the genetics. And the two of them are supposed to work together to see which one of these things share common plans. Raising pets and raising workers. I love my pet dogs. They make me feel good. I think some of my favorite dogs are the dogs, that lay on your lap and don't want to go anywhere, and you can pet them all day long, and they're not barking, and they're not scratching up the furniture. But that's a pet dog. A purpose-raised dog is born with a job to do. The guide dog schools, I remember seeing a videotape of a 10-year-old girl with a guide dog out at a mall, and an older gentleman comes up and starts to pet the dog, and I see this 10-year-old girl dressed down this 50-year-old man, nothing flat. She had explained very, very quickly why he couldn't do that and how important it all was. But that's the difference between raising a purpose-bred dog versus raising a pet dog. Your expectations, your pet is just your loving companion. You don't have to have a whole lot of expectations from them, other than they're going to hang around you. You're going to give to them. They're going to give back to you. You're going to feed them. They're going to spend some time. They'll let you go on a walk, which we all need to do more frequently, and the dogs enjoy profusely. We have to have a preparation for that working career. With my volunteers, they have a hard time. They want to raise the dog like one of their pets. And I'm like, you can't raise it like one of your pets, or otherwise you're just going to have another dog in your backyard. I can't tell you how many times they've said, oh, the dog plays and searches all day in the backyard. I take the dog to the airport and he doesn't want to do anything. It's unfamiliar to him. So it's very important that they have that preparation. And again, that companion versus a working partner, I think it's the same bond. It just comes from a different direction. I think that was described very eloquently today. I'm talking about the cowboy. He's got that same bond with the horse as that little girl, but is based on working together, mutual respect and trust. And with that little girl, it's just an amazing thing. It'll probably build to be the same process. One of the issues I want to talk to, because I get phone calls on it all the time, and I know I won't get it from this audience, but it's something we can't bury our heads in the sand from. I get calls frequently. Why are you breeding dogs when we have so many dogs in the pound? And I feel horrible because I know it's a problem. I know there's too many dogs in the pound. When I see it, it just makes me wince and cry. But the problem with that is it is the significant difference between indiscriminate breeding and discriminate breeding. Breeding for a certain purpose and breeding for whatever and hoping the dogs work out. I ran some statistics just to the internet and located that some of the shelters were saying that 95% of the shelter dogs have no training at all. That's problematic. Only 5% are purebred, so even if we hoped that those purebred dogs were carrying the traits of their genetic heritage, there's a really low population of them. And the worst thing of all, there's no known history. We don't know anything about how they were raised. We don't know anything about their medical background. So you could put a dog in the field and ended up returning it inside of a year. At a conference in Philadelphia this year, somebody was talking about a bigger shelter somewhere out west that has thousands of dogs on it. Well, they decided to go in there and pick out search and rescue dogs. From those thousands of dogs in any given year, they only locate, something like 4 or 5 candidates. So it's doable, but I don't think it's cost effective, and I know it's not as cost effective as purpose breeding dogs. By doing that discriminate process, again, you're depending on the genetic ability of that animal. The talking about the bucking and the horses is just great today. It's not something that can be trained in. It's something that the horse has to have on its own. And what we want to do is create a dog that means he gets minimal amount of training and maximum amount of work out in the field. I find continually my stronger puppies that we've raised that have done well from puppyhood have great success with very weak handlers because they can pull them through the problems. They're strong dogs, and that's what I want to do. I want more dogs like that so we can pull some of the human equation out and give the humans a little more time to catch up with the dog. And again, it's a lot less waste and a lot more use. The dog in the picture standing next to all this narcotics is one of my flunkouts. He did not make TSA's pick, but he's working quite happily with the Texas Highway Patrol, and they get fines. We just had another dog. They just graduated, and the dog already found $500,000 in cash just this week. Even according to my bosses, that's not successful, but genetics doesn't care. Genetics wants to make a dog who will search and be able to find things with their nose. So I don't care what acronym they're working for as long as they're working. The scientific advances, again, I can't, there's so much great literature, there's so much information out there that I wish we can get more and more people looking at. We talked earlier about the single nucleotide polymorphisms, these small discrete units of genetics. One research project found out that there was a very high frequency of a polymorphism for the dopamine receptor in a population of German Shepherds, and I can't ever remember which one was Poland and which was in Hungary, but they looked at a bunch of German Shepherds and found this huge frequency of this one allele. And that allele is responsible for going into any environment like you've lived there your whole life. It's responsible for reward mechanisms. It's also responsible for bad things like addictive behavior. But when I look at my dogs sometimes, I do think they're addicted to their toy, so maybe it's not too bad. So the dopamine receptor being significant, and I think that's dopamine receptor D4. The olfactory receptor in another population of German Shepherds, again, I can't remember, I flip-flop them, Hungary or Poland, and they found a specific olfactory receptor at a higher frequency within that population of police dogs using their noses. So there are specific genes that we're already locating that have to do with the working performance. I look forward to the day when we're starting to look at adult dogs and purchasing them where we can do a snap kit. Boom, this dog does have the right genes. You're not seeing everything you're seeing in this dog. It's not a training effect. It's not a phenotypical behavior that's been trained in. It's truly what the dog is, because that's when the dogs fall out in the field. The epigenetic influences are huge. I can't even talk about that. Again, epigenetics is how genetics are impacted by the environment. There's a great paper by Wells and Hepper about perinatal olfactory learning, where they used a target odor with the mom, and they found the puppies were way more likely to look for the same target odor as adult dogs than dogs that weren't exposed to it in uterine. We do searches with all my pregnant females all the way through their gestation. We're safe. We don't ask them to do crazy things. It's always looking for their ball, having a good time, and carrying it around. The last 2 litters I did, both the females were playing with their ball, right up to starting to deliver their first litter. In the social cognition, the work by Dr. Hare, Brian Hare, I believe he's at Duke University right now, is really significant. When we start talking about some of that, it becomes very important. Some of the stuff was discussed earlier by Steve about the process of whether or not a dog is better at this. Brian Hare's early work seemed to indicate that a dog could read human bodily signals a whole lot easier than any other animal other than a human being. He saw it repeated in the belly of foxes as well, so we know it's an offshoot of taming. How much of it we don't know. Can it be selected? Are more neotonic puppies have more of it than the dogs that are more feral-like, the more wild-looking dogs? We still don't know. But there's huge amounts of advances, and we have to apply that. It becomes really, really significant. The future, global cooperation in improved breeding programs is a must. It's not even a question anymore. We have to have that. There just aren't enough dogs, and the demand is going through the roof. People have got to learn how to cooperate and work together for a common goal. The application of modern science to improve breeding and rearing of working dogs, it works. Filial generation works. It's hard work. It's very difficult work. My F2 dogs are proving 60 to 80% per litter versus 25% with my outcross dogs. It just breaks my heart, but it works. But it requires that you're looking for not a single line of dogs through a 5-generation pedigree, but you've bred or had measurements done on all 5 generations. I think somebody tried to do the heritabilities of Schutzen scores years ago. They couldn't find any heritability whatsoever. The thing they didn't do was look at the heritability of Schutzen title dogs producing Schutzen dogs versus non-Schutzen title dogs producing Schutzen dogs, and I think they would have had a much different outcome. But the scores aren't heritable. We have to have measurements that are heritable, which probably is speed and pursuit and persistence. The barking is another great example. Barking is huge. The last paper I saw presented, one of the highest heritabilities in the Finnish Hound was voice. The voice transfers from one to the next. It's the same thing we'll see in the Coon Hounds. Barking does tell us something about a dog. It's not necessary for my needs. A dog that's barking at explosives is not a good dog. But we know these things are heritable, and they have a function within other breeds. We need to create a world where a dog is not only our best friend, but is our best partner and our best protector. They've done the job for years. They can do even more. The requirement is out there from society now for them to do a lot more work. It just grows every time we turn around. Years ago, all we did was search items, just search luggage. Now we do personnel-borne improvised explosive devices, vapor wake training. It grows and it grows, which each threat, everybody comes down and says, now we've got to have a dog that can meet that need. And it's never the dog's limitation. I promise you, the dogs seem to shoot through this wonderfully. The limitation is the human beings and how to process this dog and how to train this dog. I get upset because with breeding dogs, we're worried about dogs searching on people, and we have rules about whether they can touch the people or not touch the people. Well, let's raise a puppy for it. They're going to have a much better opportunity to do that than a 3-year-old dog who's been raised by whatever possible rearing mechanism. Currently, I do have a proposal in with Carmen Battaglia, who's going to share it with the AKC board. We're proposing involving our nation's breeders to meet our national security needs. It's gone long enough that we've been totally dependent. I don't want to get rid of this source of our European vendors, but we need to become more responsibility for our own protection. It's been a long time since we've had to do it as a nation, but we're getting there again. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me. Yes, ma'am.
I have two questions. You talked earlier about coefficient of inbreeding. Is there particular, to maintain traits, yet to also include diversity, is there a range that you look for? And also, do you use any of the standard evaluation tests?
Well, I'll give you the quantitative answer first. The quantitative answer is you don't need to care if it's not, from the first 3 or 4 generations of the pedigree. I'm more careful than that. You can't get away from it. I was recently asked by an Air Force member, well, you don't believe in inbreeding, do you? I'm like, well, if it's a purebred dog, yeah, I do. I mean, there's just no way around it. But the bottom line is I try to keep it around 3%. My F2s actually have a lower inbreeding coefficient than my F1s. And that's just, it's hard to do, and that requires me to leave an open colony where we're pumping in F1s again that are I'm just going to cry because they're all going to be horrible, and I'm going to hope that there's just one that shows me a shining moment, and then argue with the staff, well, that's not as good a dog as we breed. I know, but it's going to help us in the future. The answer is keeping it low buys you more time in the future. I try not to get up at that 6% range. I think we've had one litter that was 13%. They weren't bad or worse than anything else. But then we got to worry about these anomalies within the Labrador Retriever like allergies, Am I breeding that in? We know it's a genetic problem. It's probably an epigenetic problem as well, but I've got one of the greatest workers in my kennel right now, and he just had a full-out anaphylactic reaction yesterday, probably to a bug bite. And, he's just not going to go on the field, and it's sad because he's a great, great working dog.
What about, do you use any of the standard tests in terms of evaluating puppies?
Well, so far, all the scientific literature indicates that testing puppies doesn't yield you any information. When I look at my data, the 3-month data is related to the 6-month data, and the 9-month data is related to the 12-month data. The 3 and 6 don't have anything to do with 9 and 12 months. The correlations just don't exist. So everybody wants that holy grail. The only one that I think might exist, and just nobody's figured out how to test for it yet, is probably global boldness in a young dog. It's easy to see that dog that'll just walk into a strange room, from youth. But then obviously we've got some learning issues with that as well, because you can create fear in a dog just as easy as you can create confidence.